All right, welcome to another episode of the Educators podcast. I am, of course, Mr. Burden, also Ron. With me is a longtime friend in not only the education industry or education system, but also go way back to our all digital radio days. I'm talking about my good friend Gabriel Nila. He is not only a superhero educator, but he's also a superhero in all areas. Advocate for students, and it's great to have you here. Welcome to the show, and good to see you again.
Mr. Burden, how are you? I'm excited to be here. To be honest with you, I'm really excited to sit down and talk to you. It's been a while.
It's really I'm glad to have you, and it's really kind of funny how our career paths have kind of. Although I never really went the politics route, but yeah, we'll talk about that. But how we both kind of went from all digital radio, and now, as educators, we're both big into STEM. I'm excited to talk about your drone project and all kinds of cool stuff. So, all right. So, what got you into education? How'd you get into this?
So funny story about that part. It involved politics. To be honest with you, I
Mm-hmm.
was involved with the one of the local parties here in Travis County, which is the Austin, Texas area, and we were doing the state legislature had just passed this one pathway for graduation where kids can either get a diploma or work towards getting certification so that they can get a job right after they graduate high school.
Mm-hmm.
So the group that I was with, it was a Travis County Republican Party. We were working with LULAC, which is the League of United Latin American Citizens, on creating an event at a charter school that I actually started to work at, or at some, later on I started working at. And I had just been let go from the healthcare field. There was a reduction in force thanks to the Affordable Care Act. They needed to reduce numbers in order to meet certain guidelines. I happened to be making too much money at the time, and they said, "You make too much money, you're out of here."
Wow.
Yeah, they didn't
Not,
say it exactly that way, but you get the gist on that one.
not necessarily that you're being paid for what you're worth, or maybe you're worth more, but you're making too much money. We
Yeah,
don't care how you're valued. Get out of
yeah,
here.
exactly. In fact, the lady that took over my position as regional manager was making 20, 30, between 20 to 30,000 less than I was,
Wow.
and I was like, okay, so be it. Um, Originally, I was going to go into HVAC work,
Mm-hmm.
and while doing this program with this charter school, the superintendent, he's like, hey, he asked what I was doing. I was telling him what I was doing at the time, which was nothing, and he's like, you should get into teaching. He's like, you got some experiences there, or life experiences that the kids probably need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, I became a tutor over there. Started working on getting my teacher certification at this charter school, which is East Austin College Prep, and then it kind of blew up from there.
Mm-hmm.
And I stepped in November of 2014, and never looked back at what I was doing before. I talked to the kids about what I used to do, what I have done. Um, and I can tell kids that I've done everything from cleaning toilets to wearing three-piece suits and eating fine dinners with CEOs of hospitals just to get their business. And I'm like, I've done quite a bit. I'm good. So
How
now I get to
how
help the
does
kids.
that experience really flavor your teaching? Like with students, does it make you more of a, like, instead of just a lecture regurgitation thing, you got stories to tell, you have things that can you personal experience?
Yeah, it works out that way where they get to see somebody that came from poverty essentially
Mm-hmm.
to doing quite a bit of good stuff, and then going back to a world where you get to share these stories about possibilities for these kids. And like the kids ask me, they're like, why are you still here? Why are you teaching? I'm like, because you guys need someone to help guide you and understand that many things are possible, and it's not just being able to work and make a lot of money or make money to be comfortable with, but it's being able to provide a service and help other kids or other people, and making sure that they're on the right track to being in what their minds would be successful.
Yeah,
You know,
that's why I think you and I both got into it for the same reason. We both stepped away from jobs that were paying a lot more than teachers make.
Mhm.
Probably they should be making that kind of money. We could talk about that, but there's something like I remember I got out of car sales, and I had a kind of a moment of clarity. It's like I knew that even though I was making, six figures, I was doing really well. It wasn't filling my bucket.
Mhm.
I felt like, and I wanted to kind of help future generations become critical thinkers. And yeah, it's just the light clicked on education, and it's and I feel like it. Do you feel like it's a calling to become a teacher?
Yeah, in many ways it is. But if you're looking at trying to be of service, either to your community or to just people as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at least that's what it was for me. Where it's like I've got a story to share. I've got information that people may need at some point, and somebody, I can either share it with my daughter, who heard
Mm-hmm.
my stories several times over, who was living my experiences as well because she was with, I was raising her and all that
Like,
fun stuff.
again, Dad, another story.
Yeah, yeah, single dad, raising a girl. I mean, what do we know? Nothing, But you get those experiences, and now you got other people that will sit down and will be there with you and listen to that input that you have. And then you find out in many ways that many of them are having similar experiences and or life backgrounds, and you're able to work with them. They're able to connect with you even more.
I think those connections are so important,
Mhm.
and just finding what makes what the kids are into, and having those genuine connections. Oftentimes, I've seen even colleagues of mine, let alone teachers that I've had, where they do that. I call it the lobotomized smile, where they're like, "Okay, kiddos, we're going to do this lesson, Minecraft dab." Like they
Mhm.
don't really, they're not, they don't really take the time to really understand the actual kids. And I know that you mentioned you're getting back into the classroom this year.
Mhm.
I guess this coming up, and are you excited about that?
I am actually. So I worked as an administrator for 1 year, as a dean of students and families. Basically, what I was doing is at the school I'm at right now was to help develop the culture in our school and within our community. To like it's we're the first charter school in our town, and there was quite a bit of that the people that started the school to work on, and I was able to help build that culture. The
Hmm.
kids felt safe, they felt loved every time they saw us. That we were always welcome to give hugs and to get hugs from kids,
Yeah,
which is in many cases that I mean now, especially after COVID and after accusations that fly with teachers,
yeah.
kids feel comfortable that they're like, hey, they're going to come up and give you a hug. This one little girl that was in kindergarten last year or this past school year, she'd see me, she's like, Mr. Nila, and just come up and give me this hug, and she's like, when are we taking a break? And I'm like, soon, that type of thing. Um, but it was just one of those environments where the kids felt safe and they wanted to, they know that they were loved. They knew that they wanted to come every day, as much as possible. They felt bad about leaving.
Yeah.
They knew they were going home, even though in many cases their homes were safe and loving. They're like, well, we have to go home, and I'm like, yeah, so do I. Don't worry, we're in the same boat. Um,
Can I just stay here?
yeah, and then when it came time to give those life lessons, I was there to help them out and understand why certain things that they did was not right,
Hmm.
and what do we do to fix them. So it was this great environment, and working with the kids that we had, it was great. But at the same time, we started developing this whole redesign of what computer science looks like
Hmm.
and how computational thinking is going to be important for kids now, and being able to see it from the beginning and how we started it all the way to the end, to where we're at now. I mean, it's like I want to help our middle school kids get ready for high school,
Yeah.
and I have this great opportunity to work with the kids and be able to help them grow and see what the advantages that STEM is going to provide,
Hmm.
and get them ready to say, okay, these are the next steps I want to take. I'm going to talk with my family about it, and we go from there. So it's getting pretty exciting.
Do you feel like there's always been? There's so much I want to talk about. What you said, yeah, it makes my heart so happy. But just touching on the STEM part, do you think there's a bit of a stigma that, like, because I remember whenever I did the robotics club. I was the mentor at our elementary school, and a lot of times teachers would recommend just the gifted kids. There was this stigma or expectation that only the gifted kids should be in robotics, and I always found that the kids that got the most out of robotics weren't always the gifted kids. In fact, sometimes the gifted kids were the ones that struggled a little bit because there was like the first time a challenge wasn't easy for them. Whereas the kids that were used to the struggle and didn't and needed that confidence boost tended to be the best candidates. What are your thoughts about STEM? What are some misconceptions that we may have about STEM, and what can kids really get out of it?
So for STEM, so there's a funny story about this whole thing. Um, so the districts that I've worked at, and this is going to be a dig that will probably get me in trouble in some fashion, but I'm going to speak the way it is.
Yeah.
Um, the opportunity for kids to have those higher levels of STEM activities.
Mm-hmm.
Because in some cases, like for example, when you do science, you do these certain activities that are going to be in there that hopefully hands-on activities that will help invigorate and help these kids understand more about what's going on. But when we think about STEM, we look at the tools. For example, when you talked about robotics, that's really prime example. So when I started teaching, let's put it this way. So I worked at an alternative education campus. All the kids that got in trouble for smoking pot, doing other things that they shouldn't be doing that are against, Texas rules, if you will.
Yeah.
The biggest one I would say is like possession. And we would get the kids and we talked to them, and obviously they weren't at the level that you would say like gifted and talented.
And we got to clarify possession of a substance, not like demonic possession or something along those lines.
Well,
right?
Yeah, some of them might have been. But no, you're right. Possession of a controlled substance that they shouldn't. And
some of them may.
So we got to talk to these kids, and like I'm working with these kids. We're working with up to 15 kids at a certain during an hour's time, and we're talking. We're doing the lessons. We're doing all this stuff, but we noticed that the kids actually were learning more when they were having manipulatives. They were able to have stuff that they can work on.
Yes.
And we got to the point where I'm like, why don't we have this here at this campus? Now granted, it's not a campus that's not being seen as a tested campus. All the students are coming to us from other campuses that are tested. They're considered part of a different school. We're just kind of like a holding place for 30, 45 days, But they never had the opportunity to be able to participate in these STEM activities. Like you said, it's for gifted and talented. It's all the GT kids.
Yeah.
And the question about equity came up. And we're like, how is this fair for kids? And we got to, and this is where I got really more into STEM than I did as a science teacher. Where we're like, okay, so when I asked the district, I'm like, why don't we get this stuff? And this is not actually where I live. This is like in the first school district I actually worked at.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, why don't we have this stuff here? And they're like, well, it goes to the schools. Great. I'm like, where do I get mine? And we got. So for people that are familiar with this, so like you talked about robotics. When I got into teaching, the EV3s were the biggest thing. The Lego EV3 systems.
Yeah.
The gray, red, black, white Technic parts.
Yeah.
The lady that worked in the tech department or worked with CTE, she's like, try these out. Okay. I got the NXT versions, which if you're familiar with those are probably back in the 1990s.
Yeah, I was gonna say
early 2000s. And they're like, you can use regular Lego parts. And I'm like, wait, no, you can't. You have to use Technic parts. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And they were older systems, And we're like, why don't we get them over here? And they're like, well, it goes to the other schools. It goes to these other group of kids. And it became more where you had to do the struggle for equity.
Yeah.
And doing that process, we did that at the one school district. I went to another school district where I was a robotics coach. And then I was going to be the esports coach, but the robotics coach, it was only designed two EV3 systems. And I had to push to get those because they don't want to give them to me unless I did like a donor's choose or something. I'm like, where's the equity? And they're like, okay, here's the sets. I was only able to have 10, 15 kids. And when I wanted to bring it to the classroom, I'm like, well, how do you pair them up so you have enough for these kids?
Yeah.
You don't have enough. And then if you have a school where there's two cohorts, how are you going to get these all the kids to have an equitable access to them? No, the only people that are going to have access are GT or people that say or that we have to choose based on academics and based on being able to stay after school. That yes, we'll help you out. And we had some really talented kids that wanted to, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, academically they weren't the best, or they couldn't stay after school because they had to be home to take care of a sibling, do whatever they had to do at home, and it didn't work out for them. So when I started at this charter school, I made it a mission to make sure that we were equitable enough and had enough equipment for everybody. So we started as one cohort, and now we have two cohorts going on at our campus. We're at a 2-to-1 ratio for robotics. So like now we have the Lego Spike Prime units, which are like, I mean, you've seen the amounts. You've seen the amounts now.
Yeah. Cherry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2-to-1.
That's awesome.
And it's like, they're like, how do you do this? And I told the kids, I'm like, you go talk to your friends at the school district you came from and ask them if they're working on this right now. And they're like, yeah, we talked to them. They're not doing it. I'm like, it's only for 5. Each school got 5 units. And you're looking at 1,000 kids. How are you going to be able to share them all?
Uh-uh.
It doesn't make sense.
Nope.
So we made a push to make sure that we had, based on the ratios that are given to us, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, doesn't matter. We have we're working on finding, and when I say we, I mean myself and people that I work with that I've made connections with, because the schools are like, this is too much. But how do we make it fair for everybody?
Yeah, and that's difficult too. It's like because you want to give everybody the same opportunity with the same. You want to give everybody the same opportunity to work with the cool stuff. And do you feel like there's the pushback? Do you feel like the pushback is more? Well, the alternative school is where the bad kids go, or do you feel the pushback is more just that stigma of, well, if it's give the manipulatives to the only the kids with good grades or the gifted kids?
So it comes down from what I've seen, it comes down to money. How much money does the school have, or how much money does the district have that will allow either everybody to have a chance, or just those that are showing that they have the chutzpah, if you will, to say, yeah, I'm going to do this, and then you kind of go from there. But it's for me, it's always been about the money. How do you fund properly? If they say we want this, how do you fund it? How are you going to be able to take care of it? And depending on the school district, depending on the school, or whatever the case may be, it's either you have really great relationships with businesses within the community, or you've burned too many bridges that nobody wants to help out.
Yeah.
And then, in recent years, it's like, do we have the funds for it that people can that people can help out? And they have certain limitations or certain guidelines that we have to meet in order to say, yes, we'll give you the money. And if you don't, they're like, okay, sorry, we can't help you out again.
Yeah.
So there's a couple setbacks on that part, but if we're looking at trying to be equitable towards everybody, it's got to start at the top, and then and when I mean the top, I mean like the district, either the state or the district, to be able to
even federal too. I mean,
yeah.
Do you feel like the skeptic in me always, whenever I get in conversations about school funding, the skeptic in me really gets fired up, because I feel like the money is there.
Oh, yeah.
It's just not going to the right spots. And I don't know. And that's such a generalization, because every school district's different. Every class, every school building is different. But I've seen firsthand where a school district would get a lot of money, but you don't see it getting to the classrooms. You see these large salaries of a lot of overhead in the main office, in the main orifice, the central orifice. And then by the time, because it's one of those things where I understand, if I had a Minecraft club, or if I had a robotics club or MakerBot club, that it's an after school club, and you're a mentor and you participate, and you select students that have the ability to be there as well, with no other obligations, like they don't babysit or anything like that, and also have, it's not affecting their grades. Having said that, though, the most advanced, hands-on manipulatives, like a giant iPad, or the stuff that, it shouldn't be limited to a after school club. Those are the things that enhance learning in the classroom and should be available to everybody. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and it should. Unfortunately, like you said, there's a couple. Like for us, there's a couple of things at play. The money is available
Mm.
in Texas. The money is available. We have this rainy day fund in the billions. Okay, that if you were to take out maybe a third, maybe even a tenth of it, all the schools would be properly funded. Would have extra stuff to take care of what they wanted to take care of, and kind of do like a wish list. It would even help out with funding for teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the biggest scare that has happened is that some people are arguing, well, what happens when the funds dry up? It's like, well, then you find other ways to raise money.
Yeah.
There's ways that our state of Texas can raise money to help fund education, fund all the stuff that they need to do in order for our state to grow and become better when it comes to the standards that everybody looks for when it comes to education.
Yeah.
And you're right. There's a lot of businesses or a lot of people on the higher end that receive, nice six-figure salaries. I get that part, and I understand from a capitalist side, from a corporate world, I get that part. There's a lot of investment that these people are doing, that they put in their time to make it happen. But if you're not putting in the bang for your buck, then why are you getting that money?
Yeah.
But it's possible to have all those things that you're looking at to try to uh, take care of the kids. It's out there. It's just a matter of people wanting to release, open up the purse strings in order to make it happen.
You also mentioned like the it's either you have great relationships or you've burned bridges. There are a lot of companies out there that would love to donate or to at least give a discount to school districts because that makes them look good. You could say the Burden Robot Company donated 1,000 robot kits to the Gabe Nila school, and that makes me look good. And it's a write off all these things, but it's also helping the community. And it's like I feel like a lot of that comes to that. If the folks at the top build those relationships, we could get a lot. That could also help as well.
Yeah, and we've like the district that's in our school district. So for clarification, so I work at a charter school, but we have the ISD or the independent school district in this area that has built a lot of really great working relationships with some of the tech industry here. We have a couple of places nearby that have continued to work some really great magic, and whether they've met the goals, and I say that with a snarky face on that part, has and has not, depending on who you talk to, it probably worked out great and they're still continuing, or they're like, let's try again. It's that goal setting that the districts have to meet in order to continue those great working relationships. And if you're not, and if you're just, and for many places, it's got to be where if you're just hitting this standard, this threshold here, yeah, okay, great. But what happens, like if Mr. Bourbon's robotics says, okay, you're here, what more can you do? And if you're not, and if the Gabe Nila School of Technology is not meeting that stand, is not going up higher or to try to think above,
yeah,
then Mr. Bourbon Robotics has to determine, hey, do I come over here? Do I still continue going over here? Or do I come to this other school and see what they got? Because we're seeing a lot of great things going on over here. And the school districts have to rise above what they're doing now to either be, and I'm going to go back to the same word over again, be either equitable or to be able to show that the kids that they're selecting are rising above the challenges that are given to them, and there's proof of that happening.
Exactly. The data needs. Do you feel like we're kind of almost like blinded in the education system that we're so captured by this striving for a standard that we've lost sight of what education's supposed to be?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll go back to the state on this part, and even the federal government, thanks to
No
the
child.
Every Student Achieves Act. I think that's what it's called, or every
Yeah. No child
the
left behind was part of that too, I think.
yeah, No Child Left Behind, and then it got advanced under the Obama administration on that part. When they expanded, they changed the name, and they set other expectations on that end. Um, it's like a how do I put it? You're right when it comes to the they don't see the individual growth of many kids, and they're always looking at everything's all about the big picture. But what about smaller groups that we're looking at, that we're trying to assist, especially in areas that are considered Title I? You know,
Yeah.
um, I mean, like for example, the school. I'm not sure about the school that you're at right now, but like in the area that we have, we're a Title I. We're a Title I district. We're a Title I community, if you will.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people coming in from other countries. How what's more important, to see that everybody's achieving this level of here, or do we also want to highlight from an academic standpoint and from a money standpoint, if you will, that the money that you're putting in for students that are in emerging bilingual,
Mhm.
if you will, are growing at a greater pace, and and districts are providing the support to have these students rise up even higher. And if they're doing that, why not reward that success? And obviously, people are going to be like, "How do you reward them?" Well, it's a school. You
Yeah.
know, put more money into it. Like we have. I'm not sure. So where you're at, I'm not sure how they do it when the state funding, but like we have, based on certain um assist, like it's supposed to be like a 1-to-1 ratio when it comes to funding. Like every student gets the same funding no matter what. But if you're a student that's identified as a special education student, 504, whatever the case may be, they add multipliers to it. So they add a little bit more funding to it to make sure that the students are getting the additional supports that they need. Meaning they're
At least on
providing more teachers.
paper. Yeah.
Yeah, they're adding more students, more teachers to support, and whatnot. They do the same thing with CTE courses. But in reality, we should say, okay, going to the business part, Mr. Bourbon's robotics, is that if you're going above higher on the um, if you're achieving more and doing more, then let's reward you more. So if you have a school district, or even a school district, if you will, that's saying, okay, within this area, we're achieving this, and we're showing this growth, and we have proof. Here's the data. We're doing this. The state should come back and say, okay, great. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to add more to you because you're showing such a success in helping, for example, emerging bilinguals, or people that are going to college readiness. Let's go ahead and reward you with additional funding to make sure that you're doing more and achieving more, and then excelling where other schools could try to get you, or that
Mhm.
other schools are not doing. And it would be great to do that part in a perfect world. Unfortunately, with the way the education system is that they want to keep everything the same. And I'm going to say this, people will probably get mad at me for saying this, but based on groups, special interest groups, and when you look at that part, think of the teachers unions, think about the organizations that are saying equity for all. I'm like, they're like, no, we got to keep it the same. And it's like, we can, but then we're what are we in it? Where's the bang for a buck? Where's the bang for the success where students are going to want to thrive more, instead of
Yeah.
just saying, I'm just getting this, I'm getting a burger. Why not a burger with cheese?
Exactly. Which is also your new little kitten's namesake, Cheeseburger,
Mm-hmm.
right? Beautiful, beautiful. And that is kind of an interesting thing, because I'm even from the classroom standpoint, when you're only trying to get the lower kids to reach a standard, and you're putting all your energy into that, you you can't help if you're forgetting about those kids that are already above the standard and challenging them.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't focus on growth and you focus on that standard, that can happen. And one of the scary things, I think, is sometimes people kind of have a skewed understanding of the difference between equity and equality, and more so, like, their take on it is a little bit different. So if you can define what is the difference between equity and equality, and what are some misconceptions about equity when you use that term that some folks may actually have about equity?
So here's the part that I talk about equity. And correct me if I'm wrong on this part. So at the school that you, or the district that you work at, do you have certain levels, like for example, early college, right? You probably have, I'm assuming that the district you work at has early college.
Yeah, I primarily work elementary, but yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, and they probably have like special schools or special schools within the district that's provide additional supports versus the general education area.
Not as much as we should, but yeah.
Okay, there's like a couple. There's a couple of schools there, right?
We have short answer is yes. I don't want to interrupt your train of thought.
Yeah. Oh no, you're fine. So I'll put it in this perspective then. So we have at one of the school districts in our community, or in the area that I'm at, you have the regular school district, you have the schools that kids are normally go to, but then you have these specialized schools, like a tech school, if you will. Okay. How do you get into how do you get into a tech school? Well, you have to apply for it, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to meet certain standards and get in there. And they have a different style of learning or teaching how they do things, whether you're doing direct curriculum or let's say project-based learning, mm-hmm. which some students at a school that I worked at before could have benefited from project-based learning. They had different tools to support them in order to get them to do the work. Parents were notified in a different way. And when you're asked for those resources to be able to make your classroom more successful, you get told no, because that's only for that school.
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, equity, I'm like, hey, if you have those resources, why can't we make it available for everybody? Because you're hindering the opportunity for other kids, even though they may not be the cream, the cream that you want, but they will rise eventually if you give them the proper nurturing and you give them the proper tools in order to be successful. And you can't say that they won't unless you give it that try. So if you don't have the proper tools to be able to do it, how are you gonna be able to get these kids to succeed? Perfect example is this one. There's a video of two groups of kids that are in a competition. Okay. Mm-hmm. One group has a set of laptops that they're getting, that, they're like, you're going to be investigating this. One group has a set of laptops to do the work. The other group has encyclopedias and dictionaries.
Oh, wow.
And you have a time limit to find it.
Yeah.
Google. Yeah, exactly. You Google that stuff up and you're like, oh, here's the answer. And how's that fair? It's not. Yeah,
one group's getting a better opportunity than the other. And I feel like sometimes people think equity is, and maybe it is, or maybe people jumble the definition, but I always feel like equality of outcome is dangerous because you're forcing an outcome with regardless of support. Whereas, if we focus on equity or equality of opportunity, that is everybody gets the same opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so everybody should have a laptop, mm-hmm. because now this kid right here may not use the laptop as effectively as this kid over here, but that's up to the kid. That's up to their decision. But they need if everybody is given the same opportunity, I think that's what we really need to commit to. And I think sometimes people think, well, if everybody passes a standard, regardless of how they got there, then everybody's equal. And I don't think I think that's such a skewed logic. Do you see that too sometimes? All right, we're going to take a quick break from solving all of the world's problems to tell you about a good friend of mine and a service she's offering. Are you tired of feeling like your dream financial future is out of reach? Are you struggling with overwhelming debt, trying to pay off your home early, or simply wanting to give more? Well, my good friend Vanessa Rutter Jackson is here to help. An educator and military veteran, Vanessa is here to guide you through the confusion and make your dream financial future a reality. With her certified financial coaching services, she'll help you create a personalized plan that sets you up to win with money. As an educator and a mother of two, Vanessa understands the challenges of scraping by and stretching paychecks. She's been there, and she knows how to navigate the financial landscape to help you thrive. Don't let financial stress hold you back any longer. Take the first step towards financial freedom today with Rudder Jackson Financial Coaching. Reach out to Vanessa today for a free 45-minute consultation at varudder34@gmail.com or go to tinyurl.com/RJ-money-coach. That's varudder34@gmail.com or tinyurl.com/RJ-money-coach. Remember, it's never too late to take control of your finances and achieve your dreams. Start your journey to financial freedom with Rudder Jackson Financial Coaching today. All right, now let's get back to solving the world's problems with the most charming host on the interwebs.
Yeah, and that happens. That happens almost in every school district out there.
Yeah.
And when I mean school districts, it's more like the independent school districts that we work with here. That they're like, But you're absolutely correct on that part.
And just to kind of help everybody understand, what is the difference between a charter school and like a public school?
So, if we're looking, they're both public. Like the one I work at, it's a public school district. It's a public charter school, meaning that it's open to everybody. The school is open to anybody that applies and is eligible to get in. And let me rephrase it, being eligible. So a student that wants to come to our school, the parents have to complete an application, submit documents, and a lot of it's going to be based on availability of seats. Okay, we have a certain standard that we try to meet. Like, for example, in middle school, 30 seats or 30 students to a classroom. If there's space available within those 30 seats, if there's a seat available, first come, first serve. You apply, you get in. And we still do state testing. We're funded by the federal government, or we do receive funding because we have students that have IEPs, 504s, that have certain accommodations that, based on federal guidelines, are required to be met. And the public charter schools work to meet those standards. They're like, okay, we have special education teachers, we have spaces for these kids to work, or we do whatever accommodations that are out there. But the biggest one I tell people is that you have a public school and then you have a charter school. The public schools are the ones that tax us.
Okay.
They're the ones that set the taxes, that do the taxes for the community that they serve. The public charter schools don't. At least for the state of Texas, we all funding goes from the public schools to the state of Texas, and then they allocate based on per student, based on what the amounts that they think or that they say is going to take to fund a student to learn, and the money goes where the student goes in many cases.
Yeah.
So it's those are like the main differences on that part.
So a student can go to a charter school regardless of where they live if they make it, if they're approved, if they're accepted. Whereas like public school, you're zoned. I mean, you have to get like an act of Congress, pretty much, almost not really Congress, but you have to go through a lot of paperwork to get an out of zone approval.
In many cases, yes. They do have what's called closed districts here. So if you are zoned within that area, yes. In other cases, they have what's called open public schools. So where I'm at, it's a little town or small city called Manor, where it's outside of Austin, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
We have several school districts in the area. The main difference is that if a student can live in Austin or just outside of the zoning area, the taxing area, if you will, of Manor ISD, And if they're like outside, they can apply. They can still apply to get in, to get into that area. And in many cases, they'll be like, "Okay, we'll take you." You
Okay.
know. So if they live like nearby it, or so long as they're going to be able to get to school, most of the districts don't care. And like for us, for the charter school, we have a charter schools have like a zone, like an area that they're going to be covering, which is
Mhm.
going to be larger than what the public school or the school district is going to have. And either the school's able to pick them up, or if the parent says no, I'll bring them in, no problem. I have a student right now that lives in a separate county that's maybe about 45 minutes away from us, and the parent brings the child every day.
Yep, that's cool. And so that's cool too, because like I know I have some teacher friends that have their own kids that they live on the other side of the city,
Mhm.
but they bring their kids to school, so there's no problem. But like as long as the transportation is taken care of, it's cool.
Mhm.
But yeah, I've noticed that too. That there, it's real tough, and sometimes it tends to be a bit subjective. Like when principals are approving out of zone
Mhm.
students, like if a student is, not naming any names, but sometimes if a student is achieving high in academics, we keep them. If the student's a problem, sometimes that out of zone gets disapproved, and yeah,
Mhm.
it somehow it's pretty interesting how that goes down. You're also the behavior coach thing. I think is fantastic, and an advocate for mental health because I'd love to have you come on the mental health podcast. I do as well, but it's interesting. I found how mental health and teaching and education kind of are like this.
Mhm.
And what's been your experience as a behavior coach and kind of not just the students but maybe teachers as well need to really kind of make sure their mental health is healthy.
So I started learning more about like the behavior coach. They used to call them behavior specialists, but we really don't specialize in we have information. We don't go through the long course or studies to do that part. So
Yeah.
like for the education service center region that we're in, they're like, we're going to call you guys coaches, which is fine, not a big deal. Um, one of the things, so the way what we've seen with a lot of kids is that in many cases they need someone else to talk to,
Mhm.
and it's tough. It's tough because they look at based on family backgrounds. They sometimes see that there's an adversarial relationship between students and teachers. You see this almost anywhere, every school. I mean, I'm pretty sure you talk to any teacher, they've seen some of that happen, and I've seen it also. Um, and as a coach, we have to kind of help break those barriers down with a lot of kids, and especially when I was working as a dean, you work with a variety of kids that have a lot of emotional baggage, if
Mhm.
you will,
Yeah.
or they live in certain environments that make it really difficult to develop those relationships to help these students grow the way they should. You know, some kids are great. Some kids have perfect family backgrounds. Other ones don't. They're not the best in the world. And so you, as a teacher, even you have to find those different ways to connect with those kids. It's almost like trying, in some cases, if you want to do like a classic Lego piece to a Lego Technic piece, you have to find that perfect adapter in order to make
Mhm.
it work.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and by the way, they already have those out, which is beautiful. I'm happy, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and you try
Yeah.
your best every single day to make those connections. Um, and sometimes it's like I said, it's easy, it's hard. As teachers, my goodness, one of the biggest things that happens with educators is that when you're in a classroom of 30 kids, for example,
Hmm.
people above the pay scale don't always see that when you're asking for help or you need help, they don't see it. And those teachers try to rely on other colleagues in order to support. In many cases, it helps. Sometimes it doesn't.
Hmm.
And then it becomes either from the support systems that you have in the families or based on your age and your generation, sheer will of determination. And
Hmm.
you work with those, like Case in point, after COVID, we're back in the classrooms. I think it was what 21.
Yeah, we were was it, yeah, 21 to 22, we were full into the class. I mean, we still had masks and
Yeah,
there are all kinds of things, but yeah, 21 to 22.
yeah. Like we're always concentrated on the kids, making sure that, or we try to work concentrated on the kids, making sure that that they're okay. But many of the teachers were going through their own personal trauma because of what was going on, and
Mhm.
nobody was taking care of them. Even during COVID, when we were online, when we were at home online, nobody checked
No,
in,
I
and it was
I fo-
minimal.
I found it very I want to say this. I was a bit surprised at how quickly when the lockdown started. You go to April 2020. I mean mid March, but April 2020 was when it was we started realizing this is going to be for a while. April 2020, kids are at home and teachers are like praised. It almost felt like teachers are finally getting the recognition for what we have to do in the classroom. Like it was like parents are going, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe you had to deal with all that." Oh, I didn't really. And then all of a sudden, that narrative changed. It's somewhere. It's somehow it feel, and I can't put my finger on it, but it's like the narrative changed to the point where teachers are the problem, and like there seems to be some kind of negative like narrative for teachers. And I mean, there's bad teachers out there, but it's a handful compared to the most of us out there that are doing beyond what we should be doing,
Mhm.
and we're killing our work life balance, and we're doing it because of the love of the game, the love of the job, not for a high paycheck.
Right.
And do you feel like somehow teachers are vilified in society, where instead of being respected?
In many cases, yes. How do I put this? So, as an old guy, okay, I'm 51 years old. I'm part of the
We're
Gen X group.
seasoned. We're seasoned
We're
gentlemen.
seasoned. I'm
Yes,
old. Like I
we're
tell people, I'm
seasoned.
like I'm part of the Gen X group.
Yeah, you can see the
Um,
seasoning right around here on us.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, we grew up at a time where kids did something. Yeah, we have to deal with the punishment at home, or we have to deal with the natural consequences that come along. But I think because of the negative experiences a lot of parents had, or a lot of students had at the time, changed the perception about education. So it's not an immediate thing. It wasn't like within a year's time. This actually started probably back in the 80s into the 90s, where a lot of people had a negative experience about classroom. They're like, I don't want my child experiencing what I did. I'm going to fight back. I'm going to advocate for my
Mhm.
child. That's great, no problem. And it got to that point where you see the classical meme where they're like, "What did my child do wrong?" Or like the parents argue with the child, and then 20 years later, it's what did you as a teacher? They argue with the teacher. What did you
Yeah.
do wrong? And it became a transition on that part where the students at the time had a negative experience with school are now taking those negative experiences and putting them onto the kids,
Hmm.
and they're now saying they're now very protective of what was going on. I'm guilty of it also. I'm guilty of it also. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
And so you start saying, okay, it's not me, it's the system. And who are in the system? Who's the frontline people in the system? It's the teacher.
Yeah.
And they argue about that part. They're like, nope, what did you do wrong to make my child feel this way? So it was a natural progression based on history or historical feeling or situations that parents had.
Hmm.
So when you can look at COVID. So let's go back to the COVID part. So COVID hits, parents don't see what was going on in the classroom. You
Yeah.
know, as schools were saying, yes, we share information about what's going on. The reality of the situation is that many schools don't have the systems to be able to do that, to be able to share what's happening, either through a system or through a program that the school has, or based on what they can post on social media
Hmm.
because of all the strict standards that they have.
Yeah.
Now, granted, for me, I had a system in place where I'm like, I'm going to post what I do with the kids. I'm going to be respectful to them. The people at Manor ISD that I used to work at, they knew what I did in the community. They know what I've done. They've seen organizations that I've worked with that they're like, okay, we'll let you. They said, here you
Yeah.
go, off you go.
Trust. Yeah.
And have at it. And
Yeah.
so they're like seeing what we were doing, and it changed a lot of that perception, but not to the degree that it should. So when COVID hit, parents are now seeing and this happened across the country.
Hmm.
Parents are now seeing what the kids are doing, and they saw us scramble a lot
Hmm.
in that
Yeah.
part. They saw what certain teachers or certain schools were doing to support the kids, in order to make sure that the kids, one, are educated, two, that they're checked on, three, that they are still trying to maintain some level of education, even though it's very low lift. They were still trying to maintain some level, and the school districts are doing what they can to say, yes, this is what we're trying to do, this is what we're doing. Communication may not have been the best, but the frontline people that they would need to connect with were always there.
Yeah.
To be able to make those connections. And they're seeing a lot of the stuff that we had to do as teachers. So you get a lot of praise of what's happening. And they're like, I didn't realize my kid went through this, or I didn't realize that my kid was doing this at school.
Yeah.
Both positive and negative.
Hmm.
So we go into 2021, 22, into the school year where we're now teaching, and they're seeing what the kids are learning. How many of your teacher friends, how many teacher colleagues were actually very tech savvy?
It was a handful.
Was that?
There was a lot of there was, I wouldn't say tech phobic, but there was, and this could be a whole separate conversation. Just how when when districts like our district was so focused on saving money that we were changing our delivery system, our education delivery system. Like we went from Google Classroom to Schoology, and then from Schoology to Canvas in a 4-year time period.
Mm-hmm.
And that's you're forcing teachers to have to learn a whole new system. And we did it during COVID too. Like we had to go from Schoology to Canvas in the middle of transitioning. And there were a lot of teachers, so it's been difficult for teachers to constantly adapt. Now, I fancy myself very, very tech savvy. I'm often one of the go-to folks on the grade level or in the hallway that other teachers go, "Hey, fix this," or "Hey, what are your thoughts on it?" But there are a lot of teachers that they come, especially the real seasoned teachers that have been in the game for almost 30 years. They have they were doing Ditto machine. They were doing a lot of their stuff was Ditto paper and transparency projector stuff. So they've had to adapt to technology a lot too. And there were a lot of teachers that were very scared of technology. They were intimidated by it, and so it became. And so, in a lot of cases, when we shut down, there were some of us thrived. Like I thrived virtually teaching. I even taught virtually a full year of virtual teaching the following year. But actually, my time doing the radio show helped because basically I was doing for Zoom. I was doing a live radio show with 25 kids, and it was like I mean, I was doing it for all day, but that actually was an advantage. But I was an exception to the rule.
Yeah,
there were a lot of teachers that struggled with that, and understandably so.
Yeah. So going back to that part, you have people that are tech savvy, you have other ones that don't, and they're being thrust into a tech world.
Yeah.
During COVID, kids are at home. Parents are trying to figure out how to take care of the kids, how to feed their kids, all that fun stuff. All the things that they had that normally weren't being worried about, they're worried about it now.
Yeah.
And so the perceptions changed on that part because they're seeing the teacher struggle. They're seeing many teachers struggle in this whole thing, and they're having to now help out in some cases. I'm not going to say every single case, but in some cases, they're trying to help out the kids do the work that's going on because, they're looking at a screen. They're not paying attention. They're busy, thinking about other things. They're not in the classroom working with them hands-on. And so the parents are now getting a little bit more engaged as what's happening. They have some of that tech experience. And they're like, oh, this is easy. I can take care of this part. They're saying, we had parents that were saying, I'm homeschooling my kids. I'm like, no, you're not. If you really were homeschooling the kids, you'd have to create the curriculum, create the lesson plans, do all that fun stuff
Yeah.
in order to do that. And granted, there are free programs out there for homeschooling, but you'd have to put in the extra effort that teachers do to do that part. So
Yeah.
you have that factor. Then you have the outside factor where the school districts aren't saying a lot of stuff that's going on about what's happening, when the kids are going to come back in. And then you have this other outside force saying, we don't want the kids to come in because they're going to get sick. When they were the ones that probably were not, they were the healthier ones, but because they're healthy, they might get grandma sick. And they might get another family member who's ill. And so you have this big old struggle. And so parents, they're like, who are they going to put the blame on? Who are they going to want to? You have to put the people in general try to find blame or put blame on something or someone or people or whatever the case may be in order to justify what's happening.
Yeah.
And so you have the frontline people. You have the teachers, you have the nurses, you have firefighters, police, whatever the case may be, that were being praised. But now that they're now that parents and keep in mind, I'm a parent myself. I have stepdaughter that at home, and then at the time, they get frustrated. Who are they? Instead of coming to a situation of understanding of what's going on based on all the outside forces that are manipulating or dealing with this stuff, they have to put the blame on somebody. So who's the first people they blame? It's kind of like if you can't get the cat out of the tree, you blame all firefighters for not being able to be good climbers.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I like that. I like that analogy. It's just something you said too that's interesting that I kind of had to write it down on a little pad here, is that when a lot of parents were claiming that, like, I'm homeschooling my kid when they really weren't. And I think that speaks to perhaps a skewed understanding of what we do as teachers. What are some misconceptions do you feel in your experience that not just parents but our society in general has with what teachers really do, and also and how do we bridge that understanding?
So as
I know
there's a great video out there, and I will find it for you because I had a friend play it on their phone, that basically says, as a teacher, we make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But when it comes to like so there's a lot that we do. You and I do a lot, and there's a lot of teachers that do a lot out there for the kids. So not only are we looking for we have the districts tell us, okay, this is what you're going to be teaching. No problem, But then we try to find those, when it comes to teaching, the teaching part, we're trying to find the right content, the right tools for the kids, the right way to deliver the message, the right way to express what's important in every single concept that we have to do to make the kids learn. And we have, and it's a balancing act. And as the way I told, when I first started teaching, I said, it's a comedy show.
Yeah.
Okay. You think about it this way. You have to get these kids to grab attention to you within the first 2 minutes. Okay. When you come in, what do? You have an attention grabber, right? You have a warm-up. You have, hey, how you doing? How's it going? Okay, make sure you sit down. Here's the assignment on the board. You have an assignment that they have to do in order to get them interested in the class that you're teaching.
Yeah.
In spite of all the stuff that's going on outside of the four walls of your room, and in spite of what's going on outside of the four walls of the school, you have them for an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, where you are trying to capture them, and hopefully they gain at least one understanding of what you're trying to teach. And if you can't capture them within the first 2 minutes, and either as a group or as a whole group or as the majority of the kids, if you can't capture them in the first 2 minutes, what are you going to do? You have to change the scene. You have to change. If they don't like the certain joke that you're saying, what do? You change the joke. You change the delivery of how the joke is going to be done.
Yeah.
And you do that until they get to the understanding where they're like, that guy or that person I want to listen to. And you spend the next 20, 30 minutes trying to get them to understand a concept of what you're trying to work on. Sometimes it's a direct teach. Other times it's, here's the work. I'm going to guide you. Off you go. So that's a lot of the part that parents don't understand on that part, is that we have to capture 25, 30 kids at one time.
Yeah.
Try doing 77.
Whew.
in one class period.
Oh,
I had to do that for 3 months.
oh my goodness, 77
One class period. I had to capture 77 kids, online and in person.
all at once.
All
Oh,
of, okay, it's tough. You're not going to be successful in it.
yeah,
You're gonna be
that's a
happy if you
tough
can get at
crowd,
least one.
man.
Yeah, it's a tough crowd, and you're doing that part. Now, during that whole time, you're checking on every single student, 25, 30 kids, whatever the case may be, and you have to make sure that the kids are not only engaged, but they're okay to be there.
Yeah.
So what do? You create the content, you create the lesson. You either have to say it in English, you have to say it in Spanish, or any other foreign language that's out there. You have to make sure that they're paying attention, and you're going in and you're checking on all these students to make sure that they're paying attention. You have to make sure that they're understanding what's going on in there. And if they're having a bad day, you have to decide, are you going to help them out? Are you going to be able to say, okay, I'm going to let you pause. I'm going to let you pause right here. You can rest. I will come back to you after we're done with the main part, and I'm going to come back and talk to you and make sure you're okay. But you're always monitoring that student. And if there's 10 students that are having a bad day, you're going to have a bad teaching time.
Yeah.
So not only that, you're teaching them how to read. You teach them how to understand the concept that you're trying to work on, whether it's math, science, ELA, whatever the case may be, art, science, or computer science.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to get them to understand it, and you're trying to capture them as many different ways possible for that 30 students, 30 individual students, 25, 30. It's just, I use 30 because that's normal class size from, I think, third grade on up or second grade on up.
Yeah. To me, that's too many. I think it
is, but you have to capture them. And you have to try to capture them as much as possible. And if you're not, you're like, okay, come with me. Let's go and see what we can do. How do we help you out? Oh, you don't like it this way? Let me help you out on this matter. You're crying. Let me go ahead and get you some Kleenex. You're not feeling good? Put your head down. Okay, you don't have a happy face. What's going on?
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, let me go teach the other kids.
In addition,
you're doing all these different things just to, within an hour's time, in order to capture the kids based on state standards, or that are meeting state standards for that one significant or that one lesson that you're trying to get them, so that they can move on to the next day, and then so that they can move on to the next class period and go through the whole thing again. And then when you're done with that, you check in on you're checking in with kids either on your prep time or on your lunchtime, making sure everybody's okay. You're trying to make sure you're taking care of yourself, whether it's being hydrated, going to the bathroom, making sure you have food in your stomach, whatever the case may be, and coffee.
Yes.
And you're taking care of all the other stuff that's going on with these 30 plus kids in a classroom with those 30 kids, and then depending on how many classes you have, 5, 6 classes, add 30 more parents to each classroom, and you're making sure that if you have 1% of the parents that are messaging you, you're responding to them in a manner that is safe and effective, and each parent has a different personality. And on top of that, at the end of the day, you check out on certain kids to make sure that they're doing great, they're doing fine. If you're okay, great. If not, some teachers will say, "What do you need? I will go get it for you." And they will spend after hours making sure that those kids are safe.
Mm-hmm.
Check in with me. Are you doing okay? Let me call your parents at the end of the day. Make sure you spend an hour, 2 hours calling parents, making sure that everybody's safe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing what teachers do. And like for like me, I'm like, I didn't think about that part until I actually got dirty in the mud, and I'm like, oh, crap.
I almost feel like, with the way that teachers get their degree in teaching and certification. I had an earlier podcast with Andrew Pudawa, and he made a very interesting point that we put the cart before the horse.
Mm-hmm.
Teachers should first, potential teachers should start in the classroom, mm-hmm. and get the hands-on experience, because then you really discover what we really do, and then you can start to learn the things and go forward. I also think question, especially if you're living near Austin, Texas. Texas seems to be where everybody's moving to right now. A lot of people moving away from California and other areas, and Austin seems to be really becoming big. And I know Joe Rogan's got his comedy store out there, and it just popped in my head that I wonder if effective teachers would make really good stand-up comedians, because we have to be entertaining on the spot, and we have to read the room. And we have to make those quick pivots in our conversation when we're talking to really capture these kids, and these kids are so distracted. We're competing against TikTok, we're competing against Among Us and Fortnite and all these things, and we're trying to get them hooked in and have them give a crap about what they're learning, and it's terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, not terrible, but it's a challenge, and I
Yeah.
don't think everybody understands that.
And the other biggest factor that that's being challenged against us is what's going on at home. And it sounds bad for saying that in many cases, because they're like, well, we don't need to know what's going on at home. And you're like, absolutely correct. I don't need to know what's going on. But if your child's being affected, with me being able to teach well and make sure that they're safe, I'm not going to go in and I'm not going to call a parent and say, hey, what's going on? But at least I would be able to say, how can I help you to make sure that you're going to be good with me for 45 minutes or a full school day, so that I know you're going to come home. You're going to go home and you're going to come back into school in an area that's going to treat you well and know that you're in a safe space.
Yeah.
Which in many cases now in this day and age, you have to worry about that every single time. There are some cases you have to worry about whether or not your student is going to come back to school the next day, or you're going to get that weird phone call.
You might have a student that they may not know where they're going to sleep that night.
Yeah.
There was a student, a kindergarten student, that their mom was in a hotel, and then all of a sudden they were gone for a week because they had to move, and then they showed up again. But it was one of those situations where, and the way that I try to handle it, and again, elementary is a lot different than high school, but a lot of the same stuff where you'll teach the same class to several different groups of students. In elementary, unless you're doing a team teaching, you're often teaching a variety of subjects to one group of students, but it's still one half dozen of the other. You're still having to put fires out, do all this kind of stuff. And I found that, like, I try to put it to the kids where, like, I had a couple students that were staying up until 2-3 in the morning playing Fortnite. And then they come in and they're exhausted and they're tired and they're cranky and they just don't want to learn. And at the conversations I had with them, I said, and one of them was like, well, my mom lets me stay up. And I said, does your mom come to school? Is your mom in this class? And I explained to him, and those conversations, when you have the conversation with a parent, you might get a parent like, yeah, you're right, Mr. Burden, I'm going to put a stop to it. Or you might get that conversation where I'm just so frazzled, because especially the school that I taught at is high. It's a high military population, and you often have a single parent where the other parent is deployed, or you have just single parents in general, or there's a lot, and then there's also the defensive parent, like, who are you to tell me how to raise my kid? So all of those things create more drama. But I turn it to the kid. I say, you're responsible, for choosing to go to bed at a decent time. You don't have to stay up and play Fortnite. That's your choice, whether your mom allows you or not. If your mom allows you to, do other things, like, you don't have to do that. And it's tough to get kids to see that, and more so in this. Do you see in this generation, this generation coming up, that kids are there's almost, I don't say entitled, but maybe that's the word. They feel that they're owed entertainment rather than having to work for it.
Yeah, I can see that part. I can actually see that part where they're like, they rely on the cell phone or the computer in order to get the satisfaction that they're looking for, and it goes back to what goes on at home, which I'm not going to be there to judge at all. I'm not saying, hey, you're a bad parent, because I wasn't the best one out there. I wasn't Mr. Rogers or Mr. Brady or whatever the case. What I found out, the trick to help out with that, though, is this, and it's kind of interesting. Now, you and I, as males, it actually works out to our benefit. Okay, because there's not a lot of male teachers out there.
Mm-hmm.
So the best time that I was able to work with parents to be able to connect with them is family night. So, like, when the parents came in and, like, we did the introductions, you're talking to the parents, you're meeting them and everything else, and then you have that initial connection. Everything's beautiful, everything's great. Then you go to the next step. When you call home and you're like, hey, just want to let you know, and this is the part that takes that effort.
Yeah.
You make a phone call or two or message them saying, hey, your child's doing great, your child's doing fine, blah, blah, blah. I love him in the class. And then you make that one call when you have that situation where they're like, I'm just staying up late because of this.
Yep.
Mom, Dad, your child, I just want to let you know your child's doing great. And what I'm seeing right now is that they're sleeping a lot in class, or they're doing this thing here that may not be appropriate. You don't want to say it's appropriate, but you make the observation of what they're doing in class.
It's making learning challenging or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're like, I see your child doing this. Just want to make sure everything's okay. And if they say, oh, yeah, no, and then you kind of like lead in a little bit more about what they're doing at home.
Yeah.
They're saying this. Okay, great. Guess what I'm going to do? Like every single parent, well, except for one. The majority of parents have said, I will put a stop to that part. Not a problem. Or they're like, Mr. Nila, you will not have any other problems like that again. The next day, beautiful angels. And then they get upset with you because you're telling them, hey, why'd you talk to mom? And be like, I have a set of standards. I have expectations.
Yeah.
And if you're not meeting them, I need help. And for the majority of the part, like I said, for maybe one parent, it worked out great. And it's that connection. Now, it's not to say that with female teachers it doesn't happen. It's going to happen, but because they see us as many parents see us as a role model at school because we're male teachers, based on this on what goes on, based on the district that you're in. You and I and other male teachers are the male in that student's life for that year. And it could be for year 2, year 3, or even down the road, So we're making that big impact, but we're also having the family help us out with changing certain behaviors out there.
There seems to be, and this is a topic that I really wanted to, and it's great that you brought it up, being male teachers.
Mm-hmm.
We were unicorns for a while because there rarely had a male teacher, especially like at elementary level, but even in high school, we're the minority male
Mm-hmm.
teachers. What are some of the the benefits, and what are some of the double standards with male teachers versus female teachers? And is there there seems to be some kind of stigma, and just as an example, I have a reputation of having a great rapport and being one of the cool teachers that the kids respond to, and being able to de-escalate behavior issues and be able to get kids actually interested in learning. And it bothers me, and I can't, I'm trying to put my finger on why, but it bothers me when a colleague will say, well, you're a male teacher, so they respond to you better.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that bothers me, because it's like you're saying that this, because I've known male teachers that are terrible with their kids, that just have zero connection, and are the opposite. And I've seen female teachers have that great connection and do the same things that I do. And I wonder, is gender, how much is gender a factor in education? You touched on some points there earlier, but also what are is there a double standard between male and female teachers?
Oh yeah. I mean, you're right. You're correct on both of them. There is a stigma. It sounds weird for saying that part, but
yeah,
we are seen differently because one, in many cases, we're the for the lack of a better word, we're the big people in the room. We're the ones in many cases that we are the one male person in their lives that is going to help make an impact that year, and especially if it's in a year that they're growing from maturity levels.
Mm-hmm.
And we're setting the standards for many cases, and it's not to say anything bad about the family, but that's kind of like the perception.
Mm-hmm.
It's out there that we're the ones that are setting that standard, being that role model of what a male adult should be and how we react and interact with students. At the same time, we're also the disciplinarians in many cases. So if you've ever used your teacher voice in the classroom,
yeah,
you can get a group of kids, even a group of adults, to mellow out in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And even if you use the other techniques, like, oh, wait, no problem, I have to wait 30 seconds because you guys are talking. I'll wait, I'm going to recompose. I have to rethink what I'm doing. It changes the perception of how kids are going to react in the classroom. So you are working with them and you're training them, if you will.
Yeah.
You know what the expectations are going to be either in your classroom or in every single classroom that's out there. Okay. That there and it's a unfortunately, it's one of those things that we have to deal with as male teachers, is that yes, we have to set certain standards, which is kind of why I'm going back into the classroom, because there's certain standards that we have to meet with certain students, with a lot of students, and how they're supposed to be behavior wise in the classroom. At the same time, it's a negative part for us because they're going to want us, teachers in general are going to want us to handle certain things based on our strengths as male teachers. There's a fight going on. You want to stop it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I may have to, or even talk to a student about certain behaviors, because you have to be that male role model for them to say, no, kid, you can't do this to this person. It's not appropriate. Or even guide them on relationships. I had a student ask me, in fact, fifth grade, I had one student who was considered, he called himself a player, trying to, like dating one girl one week, then like 2 days later they broken up, and then he likes another girl, some other girl likes him, so he's like, we're dating. I'm like, dude, you're not. You're just saying you like a person, then you're not. And then you're guiding them to how to speak properly, so that they don't get in trouble and that they don't make false promises. Like, I will never treat you bad. I'm like, dude, don't even say that. No, what you're going to tell her, and I'm saying this in front of the girl that he likes.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're going to say, I will do my best to make sure make sure that I don't disappoint you in how I behave, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Another student was watching me. He's like, "Are you ever going to teach a class on
Riz?
Are
you going to teach a class on Riz?
Yeah, I was like, yeah, and I'm like, he's like, can you teach a class on understanding women? I'm like, I'm 51 years old. You're never going to graduate, because we don't know how to handle that.
Yeah, if we understood women, we wouldn't be teaching. We'd be making millions off of the book we wrote. Yeah, I try to, of course, being in elementary school, I definitely, but it's like I try to stay out of I try to stay out of their personal stuff, but their personal interactions affect their learning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just, and I always tell them, first of all, I say, you shouldn't even be thinking about that stuff until you're 35. I'm always like, no, because elementary school, I'm like, don't try to grow up so fast. But like, even just regular interpersonal relationships, where I had one girl where she was crying, and it was because one friend told her she couldn't be friends with another friend, and because she had to choose between them. And I had to it was one of those things where, like, and again, this is not in the job description, but in order to be an effective teacher, you got to handle these situations. So I had to sit down with her and explain to her. I said, you need to tell both of them that if they're going to be a good friend to you, they need to not be worried about who you're also friends with. And we had this great powwow with the three of them, and it was very emotional. I mean, and of course, it's also chewing up my planning time. What little time I've got, and I'm sitting there like, all right, come on, but I got to go pick up the kids from gym. But also, like, having that powwow, letting them talk. But it's difficult to do that, to just ignore that. But you also have to be careful, and it's weird because I feel like as a male teacher, not only like with my peers, especially when the Me Too movement was kicking in, and it became a thing everybody was looking for. It's like, if you look for trouble, you'll find trouble. If you look for positivity, you find positivity. And people, having those things where if I just say, hey, how you doing? Is that going to be interpreted some weird, skewed way? But also having to be careful, which is weird because like as a male teacher in an elementary school classroom, how am I any different than a female teacher in an elementary school classroom as far as being appropriate? Whereas, but there's almost that stigma. It's like, what's going on here? Why are you that fear? And I think that's weird. But also like you're a male teacher, so you are going to be more effective at telling these kids to knock it off. Now, granted, my teacher voice, yelling doesn't work. I go to the VMI drill sergeant where they go, "You will listen to me." You got to hit those enunciations. Now, and I also think it's not to say that there aren't female teachers that are very effective at handling those situations and very effective at managing behaviors and managing and doing the things we're talking about. But you're probably right in the standpoint of there are, and again, this seems to be nowadays a crazy concept, but there are there are advantages different genders have,
Mm-hmm.
and not just society, but even physically. But it just seems to be, I don't know, it seems to be kind of weird where on one hand we're talking everybody is equal, but then there's like when I do something really well, it's because I'm a male teacher, and it's not because I did it well because of my training, my abilities, my skills. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just unfortunate. It's just a natural thing that we go through. And there are exceptions, like you said. Um, one of the colleagues that I have this year was a fifth grade teacher. That first year teaching, I tell her classes, I'm like, don't mess with her. Don't If she asks you to do something, you do it because I've already seen her face. I already know how she's going to look. I go, I would not want to upset her.
Yeah.
Because she had a mannerism that was beautiful. That when it came to doing the stuff that she wanted them to do, it was perfect. I loved it. I'm like, I got to learn something. I got to learn that from you now. Which was awesome. I loved it, and that's what I would tell the kids. I'm like, watch her because be mindful for her because you don't want her upset at all. Me, yeah, I'm gonna get upset with you, and we'll go through the rest of the day, but never get her upset.
You I mean, we this is great stuff. You definitely, it's good that I'm excited for you to get back into the classroom. You did get bit by the political bug, and what happened with that? And I mean, and are we going to see a candidate Nila in the future?
No candidacy. I'm pretty much done on that part. Partisan politics, you know. Um, like I tell students, and where so what the students have done every year, I have at least 3 students do this. They will Google my name, and they're like, I see you on Google. I'm like, yeah. First thing that normally pops up is I was a candidate for state legislature.
Mm-hmm.
And then they tell you the political party. Now, one of the things I make a point of is that I am very careful with involving politics into education.
Yeah.
And it's not because I don't have a problem doing it. I'll do it all day long. I'm like, I am a very, I don't want to say I'm not a hardcore, but I'm Republican. I'm very conservative about certain things. But I'm also understanding about life because
Yeah.
I am a little fart. Uh, and many of the things that I ran for was not the norm, you know. But it was all designed to help protect the family or save the families and save family structures so that kids didn't have to worry about parents being arrested or being, having to deal with going to jail, losing their jobs, and trying to figure out how the family's going to get fed the next day or the next week. It was unconventional. Even one of the newspapers, one of the very progressive newspapers or progressive websites, they're like, he's not your typical Republican. And like I tell the students, I'm like, I was the first Republican Latino to run in the area that I was in, but I dealt with a lot on helping families out to make sure that our kids were safe at some point.
Yeah.
And not many people liked it, and it's not because they didn't like the ideas; it was party politics.
Party politics seems to muddle so much. I mean, we're told, oh, there can't be a third party, you can't have independent stuff. But I always go back to the Chris Rock quote where he says, The problem with declaring yourself a full-on Republican or full-on Democrat, which you had to do because you went with the party that you lean closer to. But you said it yourself. It's you you. There's so many issues out there that aren't just like you have to, like, when you declare yourself a Republican or a Democrat, it's like there's this list of things that you have to believe, and life isn't like that. There are some issues that are more nuanced, and you declare yourself a Republican, but also be liberal on this issue here, maybe more conservative than most on this issue. It seems like just declaring yourself a Republican is a problem. But also, like, I feel like, and I want to talk about back to education, but do you feel like partisan politics and like that whole, like, you have to follow this list of beliefs if you're a Republican, do you think that hurts us?
Well, I'll put it this way. The Republican Party of Texas has this unique platform that I don't agree with. Not everything. There are certain, I go off of certain things that I believe in that every family or people should look into. I'm not saying that they have to agree with or not. Democrat Party, the Democrat Party of Texas does the exact same thing. There are some unique stuff in there, and one of the things that I tell people, I'm like, look, if we can agree on several factors, then let's find a way to work together. James Dickey, who was the chairman for the state at the time, and he was actually a county chairman when I started running, and then he moved into the state level. He's like, it doesn't matter about the label that you have, whether it's an R or D, L, green, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
If we can agree on 80% of what we're trying to work on, I'm going to work with you as much as possible. And it's not necessarily saying that here's a list of things that we agree with. It's on the important hot topics for that season for legislature.
Yeah.
And if we can identify the stuff that we have a common interest in, let's find a way to work together, and let's find a way. I will work with you as much as possible so that we can meet the common goals of what we're trying to work for. And if and there's going to be give and take on both sides. But if we can meet the outcomes of what we're trying to look for, it doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and make this work. And that's one of the things that we were always pushing for, or I always pushed for. My wife was kind of impressed with the fact that I was like, I'm not just a hardcore person that I'm like,
yeah, or maybe you were more what it should be rather than what the old, like, to use. I mean, everybody vote your own way, whatever. But one of the things I kind of like about RF Kennedy Jr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is he's a Democrat, but he's got. I mean, each issue he deals with is not necessarily the prescribed prescription checklist. And and I might disagree, like, and I think this goes back to the importance of teaching students to think for themselves and to be critical thinkers and to have the ability to see nuance in issues, because to just vote somebody because they're Democrat or because they're Republican, I think you allow them to control your vote. Whereas if, like, I wouldn't mind voting for somebody that's a Republican or a Democrat if the major issues they're pushing for, and also if I believe them, because a lot of people get in the office and then they don't come through with their promises. But somebody that I actually believe in, I might disagree with them on certain key issues, but if you put it on the scale, the stuff that I strongly, if the majority, like you said, 80%, what have you, if 80% or so, if there's a stronger, I agree with most of what they talk about, then that's kind of where I'm going to lean. And I think that's important with teaching kids to think critically, to not get wrapped up in Republican, Democrat, or what have you, but to really just be a critical thinker. How important is it to push that critical thinking with students and without spilling your own politics into the class?
It is important. In fact, I'll share a story with you about that one. I had a student who the mom and dad polar opposites when it came to ethnicity or race and political beliefs.
Okay.
So mom liked me because she was a progressive. She's like, but she always brought up politics, and I'm like, look, it's not about politics. It's about helping out your child and everybody else here. I'm like, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Let's leave that away. Um, and she found that interest about how I looked at certain things. Now the student, she came up with certain things about life and politics. She actually, the best one she gave me was about Hillary Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
She's a big Hillary Clinton fan, and I said, okay, I want you to do one thing. You can like her, you can not like her. I really don't care. I'm not going to tweet something that's going to cause me saying that I have information, about a certain political person, because
Yeah.
we all know what happens on Twitter.
Yeah.
So for people that got the reference, you understand what I'm talking about. But I said, I want you to look up one thing. And I go, look up this specific thing, and I won't bring it up because, social media will, like Twitter.
Yeah.
I said, look up one thing for me and tell me what you think. I asked her to do it. She looked at it, and I said, great. Any differences? We had a meaningful conversation about certain views.
Yeah.
She brought up, I forgot which politician on the right, on the Republican side. I said, great, no problem. I go, look up one thing for me. Give me your opinion after that. And sure enough, same thing. We had a meaningful conversation, and it ended up having the bottom line was like, you have to investigate. People are going to say how great this person is, how bad a person is, but until you start looking in at the different things that the people do, both positive and negative, then you have to come up with an opinion on that part. You cannot just rely on what your friends tell you, what your family tells you, unless if they just say straight out, that's it, done, we're done.
Well, it's a good thing we have a mainstream media that tells us the straight truth.
Yes, and I'm saying that with a
heavy dose of sarcasm. But I mean, I think that's important because, kind of to your point, is you have to do your own research. If you just go by what you hear on CNN or Fox News, I mean, I know some family members that are bitten by that sometimes. Where you got to do your own research on that stuff, and that goes back to critical thinking, right?
Yeah, think about it this way. Here's the best example: Wikipedia. Wikipedia has some really great information out there, but is it completely accurate? No.
Yeah,
you have to dig in there, because I'm like, like there's some stuff I had to look into. Like I had one student ask me, they brought up a subject related to science, and I'm like, let me look into this. And they're like, it's on Wikipedia. I'm like, okay. Search it. I'm like, go look over here first and tell me what you think.
Yeah.
And I'm not digging on Wikipedia because it's not like, I mean, I can say something negative about Wikipedia and not get in trouble, but I tell people, I'm like, don't use it as a source. Use it as a reference if you need to, or look into it, and then find the other sources out. Look for other sources out there to make sure that everything that you're going to be posting on there is correct.
Wikipedia is a good starting point because it's like a common knowledge thing, or a common knowledge, but it doesn't mean it's true at all. It's a good starting point to go to before you start moving on. I could talk for another 2 hours with you. In fact, I'd love to have you back. I'd even love to have you come back on and do the mental health podcast with me too.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Really explore stuff, but I'm excited for you. I'm excited. I really quickly. I mean, I'm excited about your drone project as well. Is that still something people can contribute to, or has that come to fruition?
No, actually. So, funny story about that one. It was I've done a couple of Donors Trues has become like a really great resource. If nobody's ever used Donors Trues, people should try it. It's amazing. I have one teacher, one of my friends. I don't call her a colleague. I actually call her a friend because she was there with me her and I made some big impacts at our school when COVID hit, when it came to online work.
Yeah.
She's a really great person, and I for her I got to play Santa Claus for her grandson, or for her son, for the first Christmas that he got to celebrate. So I got to be a Santa Claus.
Oh, cool.
it was
You already
awesome.
got the beard for it, right?
Yeah,
We
well, I had the suit. I had the suit. You know, like my wife said, you're buying a suit,
some of
and
us have
it
the
was like,
belly for it too. I'm
oh
not
yeah, I
seeing
got that. I got all that taken care of. I just can't do the ho 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 because
yeah.
it sounds with a J. So, um, but there's some great ways to get resources for your classroom in order to achieve some of the things. And one of the, so like me being very trying to be very tech, which by the way, I got to thank you for that. I blame you for this one.
Oh,
So first year, or actually the I want to say the first year you were teaching your cards.
the hero cards.
Yeah, I saw that and I was showing my wife. I'm like, this is amazing stuff. I'm like, I was working with the alternative education campus kids. I'm like, how do I do this? And I'm like, I was going to bug you about it, and I never got a chance to because I ended up starting to steer away with the robotics part.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, he's got this great resource. How do I do certain things? And that's where I started getting spurring that interest in doing a lot of when it came to robotics, where a lot of things we couldn't do. I wanted, like as a kid, I couldn't do because resources and whatnot.
Yeah.
I pushed to try to get those resources that we needed. You know, if it
So it's
wasn't for
my
those cards and the fun stuff that they had, exactly. I'm like, I wouldn't be able to do a lot of the STEM stuff I'm doing right now and be able to push myself to do it even more because I think you moved. If I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong in this part. You went to the cards, and then you moved into robotics. It was kind of
Mhm.
like almost. I don't want to say it was a transition, but it kind of flowed
Yeah.
on that part. And I'm like, I looked. I was always following you on Facebook, and I'm like, what is he doing today? And it was amazing stuff. It was just amazing stuff, and it kind of pushed me to do more and more. And it got to the point where my mindset said, how can we do more for these kids to be able to do stuff? To get the kids to learn more and be excited about one school to STEM. And so that's why. So I started pushing myself more and more on that part. I was able to partner up with some great people to help out getting tools that we needed. And then I found Donors Choose. And Donors Choose actually was really good. And I was able to fund projects for kids that we were able to do things.
Really
And
quickly, is
yeah,
Donors Choose like a kind of like a GoFundMe for teachers?
yes,
Or
if you will, yeah. The difference is that the schools that some schools will accept, a lot of schools will accept it, other ones won't for whatever
Mhm.
reason. But if your school allows you to do that part and use them, great stuff. And like one of my teachers, one of my friend is an ELA teacher. She was able to get some great books, graphic novels for the kids
Oh, so
for
cool.
at different levels to read. Um, and I do a lot of mine on STEM related stuff. So one of the things, so we do as an administrator, you get to see stuff that's out there that works out for kids.
Mhm.
And one of the things I mentioned something about drones one time, and of course, social media, Facebook is like, "Oh, we should try this out. You should look at this one." I'm like, "Son of a biscuit," you know, or "Son of a building block." Sorry, I have to
Yeah.
do the Toy Story reference.
Build your own bee. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, kids would love this, and we're getting kids to understand coding, JavaScript, and Scratch coding. I'm like, how do we get them to understand it a little bit more, and they can see this thing flying around, and there are some programs, some machines out there that you can connect to Scratch, connect to Python to code,
Mhm.
and do all the great stuff that's out there. So going into computer science next year, there's one of the great things I love about the school that I'm at right now is that I get a lot of freedom
Mhm.
on how I teach. I have standards that we have to meet when it comes to computer science. There's certain things I have to do,
Mhm.
but adding onto it allows me to go ahead and give that freedom to have kids be interested who may not be interested in typing something on a program to see it virtually or
Mhm.
working on a robot. I'm like, great, no problem. Let's try something out. So we ended up trying this part out. I got to, I ended up getting some of our sixth graders were really interested in the environment, and I'm like, so let's try a couple of projects. So we're looking at coding. We're trying to get a set of drones that we can do for grade level to look at the floodplains that we have here in Manor and
That's
how changes have happened since the city has expanded quite a bit and how they've changed some of the green the floodplain areas to manipulate the flooding. Because we have these flood zones or floodplains that may not be you're not guaranteed flooding every single year, It's kind of like 100 years flood that happens in certain areas, and they built.
Like irrigation and all kinds of different. Yeah.
Yeah, they changed like the irrigation system in that area because it's a lot of farmland over here, and they've changed pathways where water is going to flow. Houston's a prime example where they've added a whole bunch of cement and it's caused a lot of flooding. Um,
Yeah.
and it's in the pathway of hurricanes. You know,
Yeah.
we get like the end results of them, especially within the Gulf of Mexico, but it's
Yeah.
affected how water moves with infrastructures being built, how water moves.
Hmm.
And one of the plans that we're looking at trying to get taken care of on that part was how do we get that? How do we get the kids outside, check out an area, and be able to take pictures and video of the area? So it came out to the point where I'm like, well, let's code these machines. And there's a
That's
certain
so cool, man.
yeah. So there's a couple of drones out there that you can actually code. I think Telo's one of them. Code Drone is another one that you
Hmm.
can do that part. So we ended up getting like a set of 3 of them. The donors choose, and it's cool. I got to play around with it, because I have to teach it. So I
Yeah.
just play, and I'm like, okay, how do we make this bigger? We're always about making bigger. So we have a couple of sets out there, a couple of projects that we have out of the donors choose that we're going to try doing an environmental part because that way the kids can see it. The kids are interested in that part. How does computer science tie into that? Well, we're going to do this whole. There's a plan out there where kids are going to be able to share their data on or information on a Google site that either students build as a team or individually, so that we can show what they're learning. And then at the same time, for students that have met the standards or met expectations in the classroom, for the work that we're going to be doing for computer science, we add an additional project for them to work on, or even once we're done with the lesson every quarter, we have a challenge for them to do project-based learning type thing, or
Mhm.
we do direct teach either robotics or droning. How do you get this work? How do you get these machines to work? And I've actually found some really great projects involving medicine or healthcare and
Wow.
drones. Yeah, so
Really?
it kind of there's some really great projects out there that we're looking at doing, and I'm like, if we can push these kids to enjoy STEM more, then we've got more kids that are going to want to be able to get into some type of field, whether it's from college, where they become great computer scientists, or they go into some type of tech industry or tech field straight out of high school where they have that interest and then build from there. So yeah, so right now that's kind of like my best friend right now, where we're doing um we have a couple I have a couple of projects on donors choose that that we're working on trying to get these kids, because it's all about trying to find that interest in student learning.
That's so cool. I just the idea of kids, yeah, it opens up so many possibilities, like you said. Just and this kind of circles back to this whole thing. It's like have these things available. There's so much we can do now with all kinds of technology, and that's so cool. That's so gnarly, dude. And first of all, I'm honored that you said that. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's one of those things that this sparked my curiosity about this, and that sparked it's like that chain fire, you know.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, what can we do? How can we add this? How can we do this? And I got into the Minecraft Education Edition, and so the kids were building stuff in Minecraft. Like we did a working aqueduct in Minecraft for ancient Rome, and it was really
Nice.
cool. The kids got to do that. We had I had a group of kids put on a Greek play in the theater of a Minecraft mock-up of the theater of Dionysus. And what
Wow.
we did is I put my Minecraft view on the screen, and then they're in the back, and with microphones they enacted their play using their Minecraft avatars, and it was really cool. But that's the sky's the limit. I mean, you and I could sit here for hours
Oh
going
yeah.
back for it just the things that are available, and to me, if I was in charge of like education, I would be dumping money into the schools for these kind of things. One, I'd be paying teachers more, of course, but also like I would also be hiring more people. I would even hire people just to be like because there are folks that are the there's like in Virginia Beach schools, we have our IT person, but we also have our information technology coach, and
Hmm.
they're not the ones that go and troubleshoot and fix your computer, or they fix your board. They're the ones that are introducing you to those kind of things, and their job is to go out and seek. But what happens is with the insane staffing thing, they end up covering classes, or they end up putting out fires, and they rarely get to do their job. But that's what we need, man. I'm just really excited. And can people donate to it, or is it
Yeah.
owner's choice? You say?
Yeah, I can share the link with you later on if you like.
I'll put it in post production. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. So you're in Virginia, right?
Yes.
Okay. Have you guys
Virginia
looked into
Beach.
the East Virginia Beach? So one of the things you got to look at when it comes to tech, look at esports.
Mm-hmm.
I know, like for example, here in Texas, we have esports here. In fact, our campus started the first esports team in the town that I'm in, which is Maynard. They're expanding the organization I'm part of, which is the Texas Esports Federation. They're expanding it to elementary school now, competition.
Oh, wow.
So like 4th and 5th grade students will be able to participate in that type of level, because kids are like, how do we get in there? It's like, for us, it was last year was 6 on up, and now they're doing elementary, and I'm like, okay.
All right.
All
right. I got to ask, do you feel, because I'm feeling it, I'm excited and I'm happy for them. Do you feel a little jealousy, though, that we didn't have this crap when we were kids?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, keep in mind, somebody made a good reference to me recently. We had the green screen computers.
Yeah, Oregon Trail, or what was the other one? The lemonade stand game, or we had one that was like it taught you food chain, like you're plankton and a whale comes by. Do you swim towards the whale? Or do you swim away? Yeah, we had one of those games. But yeah, we had the green screen.
So I talked to one of the ladies that works at Oracle, and we're about the same age. And I told her, I'm like, I actually started learning about computer science back in '88, and the DOS was the biggest hit. Everybody was using DOS, and then people are like, go to Pascal. Pascal is going to replace DOS.
And then
me, like a pendejo, like a dummy, I'm like, oh, this is it. I'm going to do this. I'm like telling my mom, I'm like, Mom, we got to get this, and they're like, no, and it was that whole big thing. And it's like, that's where, for me, that was the phase that I was in. But it went back to equity. How do we get all these kids to get involved in learning how to code on Pascal when not everybody was interested in it, or nobody wanted to do it? And Mrs. Dominguez, I love her, God bless her soul. She pushed several of us to do this part. And then we had, it was, if there was more resources out there to do that part, imagine what would happen with us.
Yeah.
It would have been amazing. Like, and I'm glad that the resources are there for the kids now, because, like for many of us in teaching, we're there to help out the kids grow and become better people, better humans, so that, those advantages that some teachers gave us, we want to be able to make sure that those students have, all our kids that we're working with have those, have those advantages that are given to them, so that they can take advantage of it or use them and be able to excel in their own lives, so that hopefully at some point they say, yeah, we're going to go and do the exact same thing, whether it's with their kids or with a friend, who cares, so long as they're sharing that knowledge that they have.
And the kids want to come to school. Kids want to they hop out of bed because, I'm going to work on this today, or I'm going to play with this today. And if the kids feel like they're playing and don't realize they're learning, it's like you got them.
And my ELA teacher friend who has been phenomenal this year. Like, we started the esports team. I had a group of kids. They're like, hey, can we bring your the switches? I'm like, yeah, so long as you don't use them in class, or if the teacher lets you, great, no problem, do that part.
Yeah.
Hook them up to the Wi-Fi and make sure that they're like, let's get the free Wi-Fi. I said, no, I got a hookup for you. And that way they can play a lot safer. And God bless them. She'd say, okay, if you guys are done, you can practice, you can play. So all the kids that I had for my esports team that brought in their systems, their switches, they're playing, and I'm like, I gotta sit down one day with them and just play, just to make that connection. But it got to the point where they're like, yeah, we can, use them. Go. It's their downtime. It's their decompression.
Yeah.
For, to survive.
Well, let's set up another time and have part 2, because we could talk for another 3 hours. But this has been great to have you, and I know that you have a late day Father's Day gift incoming.
Oh yeah,
that you're looking forward to.
Yeah.
And is there good sushi out in Texas? Is there good sushi?
I'm sorry?
Is there good sushi out in Texas?
There is. There's a couple of places. One in Houston that I've tried. We're gonna try one just outside of Austin. I think in Round Rock that we're gonna try out today. And and like we tell people, I'm like, my go-to one is one of the supermarkets here, which is HEB.
Yeah.
They have like all their stores. I think now have this place ethnically correct. By the way,
Mm-hmm.
They have the sushi place, and the reason why I say that is ethnically, it's forgive me for ever saying it. You have Asian people actually making sushi. It's like
probably,
yeah, no, they are. They're the ones that are doing it. It's like when you go to a Chinese restaurant, normally you have a whole bunch of Mexicans making Chinese food.
Mm.
Yeah, this is ethnically correct.
Yeah, that should be the label on the thing.
Exactly.
Well, any final words of wisdom or encouragement to all those educators out there that are finally getting a chance to breathe after a crazy, crazy year, and they're getting ready to, or some folks that already the sand's getting out of the hourglass, so have to start planning for the fall?
Here's the best thing I'm gonna tell people. I can tell people right now: find a way to decompress for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's for a day or two, just find a way to just don't worry about education for a day or two.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the type of person that says I'm working straight through because I'm learning and doing that stuff. In fact, we're going on vacation. We're going on a cruise for a week. When we come back, I'm jumping back into work on lesson plans and working on professional development during the month before we go back to school.
Yeah.
But you got to find a way to decompress and just get away from it, disconnect, Netflix, whatever you need to do, and also sometimes a nice glass of wine or a nice snort, you're good,
Well, Gabriel, this has been fantastic. I'd love to have you back on, and let's obviously we'll stay in touch. Where can people find you? Are you mostly a Facebook person, or do you have a Twitter?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and on Twitter. I use Twitter to troll a lot when it comes to education.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm telling you right now, if you want July, August, as you guys get ready for your if you do wish list on Amazon.
Yeah.
I found a really cool way to go ahead and from a political standpoint, go after certain events that go on where you will have some great people that will want to support your classroom as much as possible.
Nice.
It's amazing on that one. And I'm on there every once in a while, but I do a lot. I get on Facebook quite often, just to check on the families or check on stuff. Post pictures of the cat and the grandson.
Yeah, Cheeseburger. Shout out to Cheeseburger, by the way, adorable cat. Well, we'll put all your social contacts in the editing and at the end of this, and everybody can reach out to you. But in the meantime, Gabriel, thank you so much. This has been another awesome episode of the Educators Podcast. I am Mr. Burden. On behalf of Mr. Nila, I will see you guys later. Have a great one.
Thank you, sir.
And namaste. Go get some rest and unplug. Catch full episodes of the Educators Podcast every Thursday at 4 p.m. Real educators with the real issues in education. Thank you so much for watching. And, of course, take care of yourself. Jeans passes for anyone who likes, shares, and comments on this video. Have a great week.